Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's Pyromancer here, and welcome to my channel. I hope you're all having a wonderful day, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. And today I'd like to talk about something that I've had in the back of my mind for quite a while now, and that is the history and perhaps true form of not only the Black Empire, but the old gods themselves, from constructing technological advancements that the Titans and Keepers have literally taken credit for, all the way to them evolving from some earlier, perhaps more elementally aligned form. There is much to discuss regarding the old gods, their history, and what is to come. So, if you do enjoy this video, make sure that you leave a like and you subscribe. Sit back, relax, and let's get into it. Primordial, Eldritch, Chaotic. These are but a few of the words we use to try to describe the unknowable old gods of World of Warcraft. Deeply rooted in the disturbing cosmic horror of H.P. Lovecraft, these great and terrible beings, these things that should not be, are among the most interesting creatures in all of the fantasy genre. Cthulhu, Yogg-Saron, N'Zoth, and the great serpent Y'Shaarj are the names by which we know them now. But were they always the terrifying and corruptive beings we know them to be? Or during a time veiled deep in the annals of history, were they made into monsters of madness? Join me as we take a closer look into the potential origin of these enigmatic creatures and seek to uncover truths hiding in plain sight. Let's start from the beginning. Cthulhu, the Karaji, and Silithid were all introduced to us in vanilla World of Warcraft, with a few in-game texts referring to several other old gods that had not yet been discovered. The Old Gods and the Ordering of Azeroth book claims that there were 5 evil beings that had been chained beneath the earth by the Titans and their keepers. While we have been given the names of 4 of these beings throughout the years, the identity of the 5th yet eludes us. We've seen murals and the remnants of a creature in Azj'aqir, the final zone of the base expansion, The War Within, but it has not yet been named. There was also the discovery of a sort of synthetic, Titan-made old god in the research facility known as Ulduar in Zandalar. This old god was created by testing on, I believe, trolls, Loa, and even the old gods themselves. Could there be more still, beyond the 5? Perhaps, but let's focus on those which we know of for now. Chronicle Volume 1 tells us about 4 of these old gods, though later volumes again suggest the existence of a 5th. It says that the old gods are physical manifestations of the void. They are nightmares incarnate, mountains of blighted flesh and writhing tentacles that grow like cancers within the worlds of the Great Dark. These malignant entities serve the Void Lords, and they live only to transform the worlds they infest into places of despair and death. Strange, then, that they would build empires and war with one another, though they're willing to unite against greater threats should it benefit them, such as Xal'atath. Chronicle Volume 1 also tells us that these creatures were created by the Void Lords due to their envy of the Titans. They're said to have been created for the purpose of corrupting a slumbering Titan, inevitably giving rise to a Dark Titan that would bring every mote of existence under the Void Lord's will. I have an extremely hard time believing this narrative, though, primarily because it was told to Sargeras by Dreadlords, some of the most trustworthy beings in the history of WoW, and because the fall of Koresh, which was at the hand of the Void, seemingly had nothing to do with old gods at all. We have also been shown evidence of the old gods fighting back against the forces of the Void. Palatar's Codex, an in-game book from The War Within, indicates that the old gods are not simply void creatures, even though their consistent use of the void, in some cases, leads scholars to assign them strictly to that cosmic force. I feel that others, such as Y'Shaarj, Yogg-Saron, and even N'Zoth, have given us considerable evidence that they are not strictly void. Flesh also does not seem to be the product of only the void's influence, and since the old gods themselves seem to have flesh, I don't believe that they are simply of the void. This could have been a lie told by the Dreadlords, which is suggested, I think, in the enemy infiltration preface Ledger from Shadowlands. or a bold misunderstanding of their true nature. At any rate, the existence of these creatures allegedly drove Sargeras to madness. Before the Ordering of Azeroth, the Old Gods were said to be cast out into the cosmos from the Void by the Void Lords, randomly searching for planets with world souls inside of them. Strangely similar to what the Titans were essentially doing, blindly searching for world souls. They plummeted from the skies and embedded themselves into Azeroth, enslaving the elementals of the world, who allegedly resisted them. The elementals were chaotic as a result of Azeroth apparently consuming most of the element of spirit. The elemental lords and their denizens reveled in the war and chaos that held sway over the early days of creation. The Old Gods eventually broke them, bent them to their will, and used them as their most powerful lieutenants. Part of me is curious if this is entirely true, or colored a bit by Titan perspective. Regardless, the Old Gods were worshipped and followed by two races of their own creation as well, the Azj'aqir and the Niraki. The Azj'aqir are the large insectoid creatures we see in places like Ny'alotha. The Niraki are essentially just, it's another name for the squid-like faceless ones, whose appearance has always interested me. During the Ordering of Azeroth, Aman'Thul is alleged to have angrily and forcibly ripped Y'Shaarj from the center of Kalimdor, a story that sounds remarkably similar to the removal of the world tree Ilunahir after Eonar planted it, and Aman'Thul chides her for planting something that leads to uncontrolled chaos. But I digress. This removal of Y'Shaarj leads to the wound that we now know as the Well of Eternity. While there is evidence to suggest this was not entirely true, I'm going to ignore it for now. We'll come back to it though. Once the Old Gods were locked in confinement, a solution the Titans decided on after witnessing the damage caused to the world by Aman'Thul's brazen act of rage, the Keepers set about staunching the escaping lifeblood of the wound, eventually calming it into a massive lake of arcane power known as the Well of Eternity. The energy of this well would be used to help bring order to the world and accelerate the propagation of life which the Titans approved of, since evidently their rules about protecting life at all costs did not apply to demons or the denizens of the Black Empire. Hypocrisy at its finest. Several places on primordial Kalimdor were the sites of the coalescing energies of the Well of Eternity. These locations, of course, include Ungoro Crater, Sholazar Basin, and the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, all places that are remarkably close to Azj'aqir descendant civilizations like Ahn'Qiraj, Azj'on-Nerub, Azj''Kahet, and of course, Mansi-Ves. It's possible that other locations exist where these energies gathered and we do not yet realize it, like maybe a place like Stranglethorn Vale. Interestingly, the maps of this time from Chronicle show the prison location of each Old God, but curiously, N'Zoth's is seemingly incorrect. He is said to have been imprisoned underground to the southeast of the well, but the Azshara Warbringer cinematic tells a different story. N'Zoth claims that for 1,000 years, bound beneath these waves, he had watched Azshara. We also learn in the Nazjatar patch of the Battle of Azeroth that the final prison where N'Zoth is housed is connected to the Eternal Palace. What's funny about this is the fact that the Eternal Palace, Nazjatar itself, and Zinashari, the ancient city ruled by Queen Azshara, all existed along the rim of the Well of Eternity, which is much bigger in reality than we see it in the game dungeon, the Well of Eternity. It's significantly larger. And N'Zoth is claiming to have been underwater for 1,000 years before the Sundering. This blatantly tells us that the imprisoned location of N'Zoth from Chronicle is incorrect. He was not imprisoned underground. He was imprisoned, I think, in the Well of Eternity. I believe this was meant to be a rather big reveal for lore enthusiasts at the time, yet I believe almost nobody noticed this truth. I think this could also suggest that the alleged creation of the Well of Eternity is perhaps not entirely correct either. The story about Y'Shaarj. Many years after the imprisonment of the Old Gods and departure of the Titans, the followers of the Old Gods existed in an ancient empire known as Azj'aqir. There's actually a Warlock set referencing this exact empire. There are also archaeology items suggesting that the Tol'vir were part of this empire as well, perhaps debunking the possibly Titan-made lie that the Tol'vir were originally Titan-forged. At any rate, this empire warred with the Trolls, who were at the time the mightiest mortal civilizations on Azeroth. The Trolls fought them for many thousands of years, but never succeeded in winning a true victory over the Azj'aqir. Eventually, due to the Trolls' persistence, the Azj'aqir kingdom split in half as its denizens fled to separate colonies in the far northern and southern reaches of the continent. These were the Azj'aqir nations of Azj'ul-Nerub, Azj'aqir, and Ahn'Qiraj. A fourth colony was also established in Pandaria, known as Manti-Ves. In my opinion, it is likely that these enclaves were affected by the magical energies spread across the world by the Well of Eternity long before the Sundering, as if the Well, similar to the Trolls and Elves, had led to a sort of rapid evolution of their kind, which resulted in several different offshoot races. These civilizations are typically not very far from areas inundated with the energies of the Well, according to Chronicle. Again, places like Ungoro Crater, the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, and Cholazar Basin. Simply put, the Azj'aqir, which were spread apart, became these other races. Unless the Naraki became Cathraxi, it appears that they did not undergo any major changes, from what I can tell. An old prophecy from Vanilla, actually, written by Prophet Scarum, claims that the Silithid did not come to exist until the energies of the Well of Eternity created them. The Karaji were then created by Cthulhu from the Silithid. Whether or not this is entirely true is unclear. Cthulhu itself rests in what is alleged to be a Titan facility, known as Ahn'Qiraj, though I do not believe this to be a Titan facility in truth. I think it is a remaining city of Azj'aqir. If it is a Titan facility, as Chronicle claims, it bears essentially no resemblance to any other Titanic architecture on Azeroth, with the single exception of Uldum, which I also believe was actually built by the Black Empire. Both of these places are said to have been created by Keeper Ra and his Titan Forged, but if anything, I believe the Keepers found Uldum and Ahn'Qiraj to the west, the great city housing Cthulhu, and repurposed it, claiming that they had constructed it. Chronicle Volume 1 makes mention of the Black Empire building huge temple cities around their gods, such as perhaps Ny'alotha. Ny'alotha, of course, bears striking resemblances to both Ahn'Qiraj and Uldum in its design, including obelisks, Sumerian, and Egyptian architectural styles, something not found in basically anything made by the Titans. When we find Cthulhu in Vanilla, it does not appear to be in a prison as far as I can tell, though Chronicle claims it is. The room is nothing like that of Yogg-Saron, N'Zoth, or Y'Shaaraj's prisons, blatantly missing the blue celestial chains holding them in place. Instead, it rests at the heart of a great scarab-shaped temple. This could reasonably be an artifact of the times, as AQ40 was part of Vanilla back in 2006. The narrative with the old gods and void lords had not yet been extrapolated on, and would not be until Chronicle Volume 1 in 2015. Perhaps the design of this city reflects this change in narrative later down the line. Another inconsistency, however, lies in the Obsidian Destroyers, constructs that are alleged to be created by the Keepers, a form of Titan Forged. Yet we see the Azj'aqir making them in Ny'alotha. I think this is indicative of the Black Empire being significantly more advanced than we give them credit for, and the Titans and Keepers trying to obfuscate this reality, taking credit for their creations. The Edicts of the Prime Designate 742, a lore book from Dragonflight found in the updated Ulduman dungeon, sheds direct light on this possibility. In it, Prime Designate Odin writes, "First, all historical records documenting the advancements of the Black Empire are to be purged. Paint that age as one of chaos and misery, a pernicious blight that we Keepers eradicated. With the old gods locked in confinement, there should be no evidence available to contradict our assertions." Well, Odin was fucking wrong about that. Surely, if you care for these mortals, you would not wish to see them led astray into darkness. Just a little bit of gaslighting there. And, second, attribute all accomplishments and works of wonder to the Titans alone. Despite the relentless arguments made by some of you, this is not a fallacy, so the Keepers, some of them were quite aware that this was not true, and they were being commanded to spread this propaganda. After all, can anything truly be said to exist until it has been ordered? Of course not. Therefore, it is irrefutable that the Titans are the source of all creation, which they are not. As is true in many situations, the writings of Odin are quite damning indeed. They directly suggest that the Black Empire had indeed developed some of their own impressive technology. The Keepers were then instructed not only to lie about these advancements, but claim them as their own. This is but one of the many examples illustrating the colonizing tactics of the Titans and their servants, and it heavily implies that what we know about the Black Empire, and even the old gods themselves, may be wildly untrue. Narratives and histories falsely architected by the Keepers in order to stop mortals from uncovering the truth of their own origins. After all, it's not like orcs, Draenei, Koreshi, and myriad other races in WoW are alleged to have come from corrupted Titanforged. In fact, the orcs of Warcraft are the result of elementally charged giants created by Agramar mixing with the spores of massive spirit and life-aligned old godlike beings called spore mounds on Draenor, which were at one point all connected in a single giant network known as the Evergrowth. Agramar separated them using mountains and sent a large stone construct known as Gron, imbued with fire and other magics, to take them down. I wonder if the old gods were ever connected in this way, or a part of a larger network, like a grand network of roots or trees. At any rate, perhaps Herondar will help shed light on this particular idea. Moving on, Yogg-Saron, the Fiend of a Thousand Faces, is the old god alleged to be responsible for various maladies throughout the history of Azeroth, from the corruption and deception of Loken, Keeper of Norgannon, to the Curse of Flesh, the corruption of Galakrond, and even the Nightmare itself. His presence has been felt time and time again. But were all of these allegations entirely true? How is it possible that a single old god could be responsible for so much? A creature showing connections to spirit, illusion, and death itself, Yogg-Saron gives some of the strongest indications that the old gods are indeed more than just manifestations of the void. His crystallized blood, known as Serenite, was the choice metal used by the Scourge, as the undead were seemingly immune to the maddening effects of it, though when they speak of Yogg-Saron's name in the language of death, they do not appear very fond of him. Master smiths of the Scourge could take the otherwise brittle material and forge great weapons, armor, and even Icecrown Citadel itself. This blood, somehow overlooked by the Keepers, helped spread the madness and corruption of Yogg-Saron all over Northrend. The great roots of the World Tree Andrasil reached far and wide, eventually touching upon the very prison of Yogg-Saron, allowing him to seed the corruption known as the Nightmare into the Emerald Dream, which is also confusing because we've seen examples through Xavius and other satyrs that the Nightmare corruption is actually related to the power of Fel, reference Felvine in the quest pertaining to it from the Dire Maul dungeon in Vanilla. A common misconception, I think, is that Yogg-Saron spreads some type of magical affliction, known as the Curse of Flesh, but the truth of this corruption can be found in records as far back as Ulduar from Vanilla. Yogg-Saron didn't taint the Forge of Wills with flesh, but instead altered it, such so that it would disrupt the stabilization matrices within the Titan Forged being churned out by the Great Machine. It is revealed in the Discs of Norgannon that the Titans made creatures of biomass on other planets, and that the Earthen were a variant of the standard subterranean being matrix, the standard design. In fact, the Dwarves are said to be an acceptable variant, much more similar to the standard subterranean being matrix used by the Titans on other worlds. In other words, the Keeper's records indicate that the Titans were familiar with flesh, and what we understand to be some kind of corruption spread by Yogg-Saron is a lie. It isn't a curse giving something flesh, it's an interruption to a curse that turned things to stone. What else have the Titans and their Keepers lied about? While little is known of the old god Y'Shaarj, the god of seven heads, he seemingly has connections to things like the Dark Moon Fair, his appearance matching the banner shockingly well. His head and antlers also remind me deeply of Khonsu, Loa of Change, or Chaos if you'd like to use that word. He bears a strong resemblance to the cloud serpents of Pandaria, ancient beings which have an obfuscated origin. We don't know where these beautiful serpents of the sky came from, but it would be foolish of me not to point out their similar design not only to Y'Shaarj itself, but other serpents found among the Black Empire. When I tried to ask Dave Kosak, who at the time was the lead narrative designer for Mists of Pandaria, where the cloud serpents came from, he coyly responded, "The eggs. There's a whole quest line about it." But what came first, Dave? The serpent or the eggs? Where do cloud serpents come from?
From those eggs. You do all the quests. There's a thing you can do. Yeah.
From the eggs. It's such a good answer. I love that.
That's good. Yeah, you can do a whole quest on it, and it's great.
You know, I saw the Hearthstone art of Y'Shaarj, and I thought, man, he looks shockingly similar to a cloud serpent. So I figured I would ask that, see what you had to say about that. There's a boss in the Mists of Pandaria raid, Throne of Thunder, which may give some hints as to the true origins of Y'Shaarj as well. The fight description for Megara reads, "Even the most callous among the Mogu quaver at the thought of the dark experiments performed at the Thunder King's behest. Long ago, a young cloud serpent was twisted into a multi-headed hydra and left to languish beneath Lei Shen's throne. Now, the twisted creature lurks deep in the forgotten depths, awaiting the moment it may finally inflict its terrible agony upon others. Megara has venom, ice, flame, and arcane heads during the fight, which switch in and out throughout the phases. Perhaps Y'Shaarj with his 7 heads was similar, covering several magical alignments rather than just one. Chaos magic is seemingly comprised of 6 or 7 different magic types, so perhaps the 7 heads of Y'Shaarj come together to make one primary magic, like Fel. With 7 heads, Y'Shaarj is easily likened to a hydra, or even a multi-headed dragon like Tiamat. Could such an experiment or magical alteration also lead to the creation of a being like Y'Shaarj? Perhaps Megara and Lei Shen are fractals, a repeated story pattern for 2 other beings, maybe Aman'Thul and Y'Shaarj in some respect. We do have a Zeus versus Typhon-esque story of Aman'Thul ripping Y'Shaarj from Azeroth forcefully, an event that is alleged to have led to the creation of the Well of Eternity. Y'Shaarj's corruption is found exclusively in Pandaria, which is strange, and as far as we know, any remaining body parts, like his heart, fell to the ground in the southern reaches of primordial Kalimdor. If you want further evidence that Y'Shaarj was not at the heart of Kalimdor, here is an excerpt from a Mists of Pandaria lore item called Shadow, Storm, and Stone, which reads, "Across Mogu art and literature, one legend is found, repeated and embellished again and again. It is the legend of Shadow, Storm, and Stone. Here is a rough translation of the earliest known transcript of this story. The beast of 7 heads fumed 7 breaths. The land wept shadow, and the swarm blackened the sky. Supreme was the Ancient One. None dared waken its wrath, until the coming of the storm. First came thunder, then came stone. The thunder storm's voice, the stone his weapon. Lightning seared the sky. The swarm fled from its light. Stone struck at the heads of the beast. The shadow bled into the land and sky, fear and rage that would not die. Storm's will was done, Stone's purpose fulfilled." This is so important because Chronicle Volume 1 tries to say that the Mantid came from the Azj'aqir after they fled south after the Empire of Azj'aqir was shattered by the warring with the Trolls, and that they were affected by the residual energies of Y'Shaarj in the southern reaches of Azeroth, which transformed them into the Mantid. But not only does it say this about the Mantid, it tries to say that the Azj'aqir transformations across the board into the Karaji, into the Nerubians, were all due to proximity to the old gods. I think this might be horseshit, especially with the existence of the Kaheti, although they do seem to have their own old god which they had proximity to. They all just happen to be near places where the Well of Eternity's powers are alleged to have gathered. Ungirl Crater, Sholazar Basin, Vale of Eternal Blossoms. They're also in places that seem to be very powerfully connected to the Emerald Dream, which I don't think is a coincidence. The interesting thing about this is that Kilruck, one of the Klaxi, one of the paragons of the Klaxi, literally says that they worshipped Y'Shaarj. But Chronicle Volume 1 says the Mantid were drawn to the essence of Y'Shaarj in the Vale and didn't even know that that's what was calling to them. Chronicle Volume 1 repeatedly tries to make it seem like the Mantid came after Y'Shaarj because of the Aqir that fled south after warring with the Trolls, but this is blatantly untrue. I think that this is an example of Chronicle and the Keepers in this kind of history trying to cover up where Y'Shaarj actually was. Because the Beast of Seven Heads is definitely Y'Shaarj. It's Seven Breaths, the Shah, the land weeping with shadow. The swarm that blackened the sky, I'm almost certain, is referring to the Mantid. Supreme was the Ancient One, of course, Y'Shaarj. None dared wake in its wrath, so it was either sleeping or even meditating, as suggested by the chipped stone tablet from the Time Rift activity from Dragonflight. Until the coming of the Storm. Keeper Ra is very commonly associated with Storm. In fact, in some of the tales for the historical events of Azj'aqir, he's actually directly likened to the Storm and Lightning as well. First came the Thunder. You have the whole story about how Lei Shen took the heart of Keeper Ra, becoming the Thunder King, right? So the Thunder and Lightning, the Storm, originally being associated with Ra, who is very cleverly disguised in such a way that makes him sound like an Egyptian-aligned keeper. However, he's not. He's actually much more like Raijin, a Japanese mythological figure that is associated with storms. I just don't think that that's coincidental.
I mean, think about it. The Mogu don't call him Keeper Ra. They call him Ra-Den, which is like Master Ra, but Ra-Den sounds a lot like Raiden, which sounds a lot like Raijin. And I know, it probably sounds like I'm stretching it, but come on, he's a keeper of lightning and storms. That doesn't match Ra from Egyptian mythology at all. And I really think that they did this in order to more easily convince us that Ra was responsible for the things like Uldum and Ankh-Karaj because they're more like Egyptian or Sumerian or Arabian themed. I think it's just mass misdirection when that's not actually how he's ever been themed. But anyway, let's get back to the legend that I was reading.
Then came the stone, which would have been the Mogu legions, the Titan forged, alleged to have been fashioned by Ra, the thunder Storm's voice, and the stone his weapon. Lightning searing the sky. The swarm, the Mantid, then fled from its light, and stone struck at the heads of the beast. So we literally have a Mogu historical account, art and literature, that is suggested to be depicting the fall of Y'Shaarj. And then we have a story from Chronicle telling us that, oh yeah, Aman'Thul just ripped him out, and that's what created the Well of Eternity. Like, no, dude. There's no fucking way that the historical account of both the Mogu and what is suggested by the Klaxi and the Primes themselves just happens to so directly conflict with what Chronicle tries to claim. And remember that Chronicle came out after this information was given to us. So I don't really think that this is Blizzard, like, messing up and getting their lore wrong. I think that this is more clear evidence that Chronicle, from its very initial inception, was giving us information that was not objectively true to the history that has occurred. So that is just, like, insane to me and needs to be addressed in this video since we're on the topic of talking about Y'Shaarj. Based on the Lingering Shah, I think it's reasonable to associate Y'Shaarj with spirit and shadow at least. I also think that, based on his appearance in Hearthstone, he may be connected with the powers of nature or even Fel, depending on how different those two things truly are. But only time will reveal that truth. Lastly, we have N'Zoth, the god of the deep, who is, without a doubt, the most popular old god in World of Warcraft. He's responsible, alongside the other old gods to some degree, for the corruption of Neltharion into Deathwing. He shows an affinity for not only shadow, but flame. N'Zoth is implied to have made a deal with Xal'atath after her imprisonment within the Blade of the Black Empire, when she went after him prior to discovering that he was building something which she did not appreciate. It's speculated that perhaps this thing he was building was indeed the World Core, and that the Titans and their keepers have taken credit for yet another thing that they did not build. What exactly that something is has not yet been made clear. N'Zoth is the old god whom Azshara meets whilst unconscious, drowning in the Well of Eternity. Strangely, he claims to have been watching her for 1,000 years, as I mentioned earlier. This is interesting, considering Chronicle Volume 1 tries to say he was imprisoned underground to the southeast of the well. Again, I think this must be a lie. N'Zoth's prison is connected to the Eternal Palace of Nazjatar, a city that was said to be built by the serpent-like Naga after the Sundering, near the ruins of Zinashari, which was built, of course, alongside the Well of Eternity, which was a massive body of water. Zinashari is actually the city that we see swallowed by massive tidal waves in the Warbringer's Ashara animatic, and the city that exists on the outskirts of Nazjatar in the BFA patch. If N'Zoth had been imprisoned where Chronicle states he had, none of this could be true. But it is. N'Zoth was underwater for 1,000 years before the Sundering, so we can't even use the movement of the continent as an excuse. And his prison is the largest of any old god. Also strange, considering the entity we release at the end of the Eternal Palace raid is a formless, smoky cloud of energy. Don't you find it strange that the old god who is said to be the weakest has the largest and most impressive prison? Don't you find it strange that he repeatedly refers to the Black Empire as his? Is it not odd that he had the power to transform the Highborn into the Naga? Is it not odd that his lieutenant and elemental lord stolen away by the Kraken in Cataclysm was, of course, Neptulon, Lord of Water? N'Zoth himself looked quite similar to a Kraken, and their presence, the Kraken, have been felt throughout the War Within as well, being found not only in underwater delves, but in Hollowfall questing. Remember the strange fish that talks about the sea beneath the sea? How about the Guardian floating around in the skies of Hollowfall? Is N'Zoth the Corruptor or the Corrupted? Much of the truth surrounding N'Zoth, I think, has been hidden from us, perhaps even his true appearance. You see, I think the story of Azj'aqir is meant to suggest something about the Black Empire itself, a fractal, if you will. They were conscripted by the Void, just as they themselves sought to bring the Nerubians back into the fold. But they aren't originally from the Void. During the Xal'atath lore-walking scenario, we learned from one of the Cathraxi generals that they consider themselves to have evolved forms, which allows them to resist the Void and best them in combat. Interesting. Evolved. I believe this extends not only to the forces of the Black Empire, but perhaps even the Old Gods themselves. Consider how the Void-tainted black blood was used to alchemically evolve the Nerubians of Azj'aqir, but doing so caused them to change drastically in appearance. They lost their ability to produce pheromones, and the strands which carried their knowledge from one generation to the next were immediately severed by the actions of Queen Ansurek. Their traditions, what made them, was lost. All due to ascension via void magic. What if this also happened to the Black Empire as a whole, long, long ago? The imagery from the mural in the Transformatory in Azj'aqir seems to suggest that in some way, the current non-ascended forms of the Nerubians, the Lords and Seers, are due to some type of interaction with the Old Gods. So why would the Black Blood transform them into something so clearly different? Perhaps the Old Gods themselves were corrupted by the Void at some point, too. During the Battle for Azeroth expansion, and during the Xal'atath lore-walking quest, we gather 3 artifacts for her, which are then taken to N'Zoth and traded, alongside us, of course, the Breaker of Chains, Movers of Fate, for Xal'atath's freedom. These artifacts are a Void Stone, a Trident of the Deep, and a Crown of Tempests. I couldn't unsee it once I realized it. I think we've seen 2 of these artifacts before, long ago, in the raid on the Titan city of Ulduar. Do you recall the stained glass art from the windows here? Again, is it not strange that Ashara and her followers were turned into Naga by the god of the deep? That he was imprisoned underwater? That we retrieve for him a stone that calls forth darkness, a trident, and a crown? That in the Warbringer's Ashara cinematic he is radiant and bright, orange and golden like the sun? Do you see it? The old gods as they existed to our knowledge may not be their true forms. Their existence and purpose may far predate the coming of the Void. Like the Kaheti, they may have traded their freedom for power, evolving and transforming into monsters. Blasting N'Zoth with Azerite could have undone this, allowing him to manifest again as the true king of the deep, his queen potentially by his side. And I think we're going to see this form again. Are they, similar to so many of the primordial creatures that came from the early days of Azeroth, products of the elements, or even Azeroth herself, her dreams, or nightmares? Will they return in the end? And if they do, will they be friend or foe? What could this suggest for the other old gods? Are they simply slain, gone, and forgotten? Or could they, too, return? Perhaps unburdened by the dark bargain they made so long ago. Were the old gods created by the Void Lords, or simply conscripted by them? Are they the forces of darkness, chaos, or creation itself? As Kilruck the Windreaver, one of the paragons of the Claxi, says, "Our gods were many and powerful. We Mantid worshipped the 7 heads of Y'Shaarj. Great was the Old One, and terrible was his wrath. He consumed hope and begat despair. He inhaled courage and breathed fear. When the usurpers came, the ones you call Titans, Y'Shaarj was destroyed. His last terrible breath has haunted this land ever since, but the shadows he left behind are mere whispers of his former glory. I tell you now, because you have earned this warning. Your gods are not our gods, outsider. If the old ones ever return, we Mantid will once again stand by their side. Are the Titans truly our gods either? Or did they just try to convince us of this lie? When they return, will we stand with them? Or will they send every shred of power they have at us in an attempt to finally rid the cosmos of the one thing they couldn't control? Free will. Why weren't we told the truth about the curse of flesh, their creations on other worlds? The future alone holds the key to such questions. But hopefully, when this truth is revealed, there will be enough time to stop them, lest all that is be lost to order. Thank you so much for watching my video. Hopefully it leaves you with more questions and more considerations about the old gods. Over the years, I have theorized many different routes and origins of these beings, whether they were literal dreams and nightmarish manifestations of Azeroth herself, related to spore mounds in some capacity, related to world trees, infected with the powers of chaos or void, something along these lines. I have never truly and outwardly believed that they were just created by the Void Lords. It didn't really make sense to me, and hopefully this gives some food for thought on where they actually could have come from and their previous forms. Again, I do think that the stained glass art of the kind of Poseidon or Neptune-esque looking entity in the stained glass art of Ulduar is actually N'Zoth. The other entities there could depict Azeroth, but that has yet to be determined. The blue-haired, gold-skinned lady gives me big Azeroth vibes, and the 2 children, I'm unsure. Maybe other old gods, or Anshe and Musha, or something along those lines, but really only time will tell. But if you did enjoy this video, which I really hope you did, please make sure you hit the like button. It's the best way to let me know that I'm doing the right thing, that you guys are enjoying the speculation and what I'm trying to cook up for you here. Make sure you subscribe if you enjoy. I like doing content like this, and there will be more of it, of course, in the future. And leave a comment down below letting me know what you think. There's been so many different interpretations to N'Zoth over the years and the other old gods. I can't wait to hear what some of you guys think, especially about ones that we don't have as much info for, like Y'Shaarj. So thanks again for watching. I appreciate you very much. Stay awesome, and until next time, I will see you guys later. Peace!